Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, July the 24th, 2023. I always look at the comments on my YouTube channel and I got some criticism. It relates to a video I put up a couple of days ago about Joe Biden, and I talked about the accident in which his first wife was killed. And I suggested that maybe his first wife, Neilea Biden, in some way attracted the event by marrying him, because Joe Biden has Uranus on the 7th house cusp. And Uranus on the 7th house cusp is a signature, or could be a signature, of a wife having an accident, because the 7th house is a spouse, Uranus is the planet of accidents. So that kind of makes sense. So you look at Biden's chart, you see that his first wife is killed in an accident, and you're saying, yeah, that makes sense. That's astrology working. So I think the criticism was that I was suggesting that you could actually be impacted by another person's chart. That, you think you have your own horoscope, and so your own horoscope should be your own destiny. It's not other. You can't be part of someone else's horoscope. At least that's my understanding of what 7117725 was telling me, and I absolutely understand the criticism. And in this video, I do want to address it, and I would make the argument that yes, you can be influenced by another person's horoscope. Horoscopes are like there's a hierarchy of horoscopes. There's a hierarchy of astrological events. There's a hierarchy of destinies. At the highest level, you've got the destiny of mankind, and you've got the destiny of a nation, destiny of a group of people, perhaps the destiny of a family. Then you've got the destiny of an individual, and the higher destiny always has precedence over the lower one. That's got to be the case. So, for example, if you are a passenger on the Titanic, there were, I don't know how many passengers are on the Titanic. Say there are 1,000 passengers on the Titanic. If you looked at the horoscopes at each of those 1,000, they would all have shown different destinies. Very few would have shown that they were in imminent danger of dying. Yet the overall destiny of the Titanic represents what was going to happen. It had to happen. So those private individual destinies get overwhelmed. They get negated. Interestingly, in the case of the Titanic, if you add up all of the ages on the passenger list, so you can download the passenger list on the Titanic, and if you find the mean age of Titanic passengers, at least according to my calculations, it's actually 29 and a half. So 29 and a half is how many years Saturn takes to go around the sun. So the passengers on the Titanic had a collective Saturn return when it hit the iceberg. Now, collective destinies, you could see that in a war, thousands, tens of thousands going off to battle. Some of those people are going to have great horoscopes. Some of those people are going to have horoscopes that might indicate they're going to live to 120, perhaps if you're using Indian astrology, but that doesn't matter. The collective event has precedence. And so you could say that if you marry someone like Joe Biden, Joe Biden is important from a sort of destiny perspective. I think perhaps destiny knows how it's all going to work out. Joe Biden may have his role to play. And all the aspects of Joe Biden's life may have a role to play. So, Joe Biden, what's happening to Joe Biden is important. Probably not as important as what's not so important is what's happening to his first wife, Neilea Biden. So it may have been necessary for some reason for his first wife to die. For some, I don't know, it had to happen so that Joe Biden would do this and that would happen, and then he'd become president and he'd do whatever he had to do when he was president. So that is one view. So you could say, yeah, she had no choice. Once she had made the decision to marry Joe Biden, to use another Titanic analysis, when a Titanic analogy, when the boat goes down, it drags everyone else with it. So she was perhaps dragged down by her husband's horoscope. Another way of looking at it would be that regardless of who she married, or who she didn't marry, she was fated to die when she died. She died just after she turned 30. Maybe that was her moment. That was when she was going to die. Or there was perhaps an interaction between, here was someone who was going to die when they were 30 in a car accident. That was Neilea Biden. Here was another person, Joe Biden, who had Uranus on his 7th house cusp. So he was going to be attracted to the kind of person who was going to have an accident when she was at a particular age. I'm kind of attracted to that argument, but I will be looking at this chart again. I know I've already looked at it a couple of days ago, but I'm not going to spend as long on it. But I just want to look at the salient predictive details with Neilea Biden's chart. I also want to look at a load of other 7th house Uranus charts, because Uranus in the 7th house was the theme when I was talking about a couple of days ago, because the United States has Uranus in the 7th house. I want to look at other people who have Uranus in the 7th house. For example, Louis XVI of France, he had Uranus in the 7th house. Roman Polanski, the film director, had Uranus in the 7th house. Former, Indian President Indira Gandhi had Uranus in the 7th house. So I want to look at their charts and see if we can pick up any themes there. Sorry, this introduction has gone on for far too long. What I want to look at now is the horoscope for today, which is Monday, July the 24th, 2023. So, here we go. There we go. Oh, that's Marie Antoinette's chart, but we won't be looking at that quite yet. We'll be looking at the chart for today. There it is, Monday, July the 24th, 2023. You know what? There's not a lot going on today. The moon is in Libra. The moon is not making any dramatic aspects in Libra. So, moon in Libra, moon is in an air sign. It's nice to have the moon in an air sign. We can breathe with the moon in an air sign. It's a good time for socializing. We can enjoy ourselves in a sort of quiet, low-profile way. I suppose I should mention, though, that the moon is moving into the Via Combusta. It happens every month. In a way, it's not a big deal. The Via Combusta is a part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And when the moon is in the Via Combusta, sometimes things just happen in this kind of weird way. We expect one thing to happen and something else happens, or things don't quite go right. It's quite an unstable part of the zodiac, but it's at its most unstable when it goes and moves into Scorpio. Moon Libra in Libra here, it's we can deal with it. It's not. It's really not a big deal. So that's the main thing going on. There is another thing I want to mention, and relates to the hypothetical planet Zeus. And Zeus is the planet of explosions, gunshots. It's very much associated with war. And it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. The problem here is, of course, that Mars-Saturn relates to death, and destruction and delay. Zeus is actually, I think Zeus is, let me just show you where Zeus is, because I talk about Zeus and I don't actually show what it means, and I need to show you exactly what I mean by Zeus. It's going to look very cluttered, this chart, when I put Zeus up. There you can see Zeus. Zeus, you can see that little arrow with a cross on the bottom. That's a symbol for Zeus. And you can see that Zeus is at 2224 Libra today. That means that it's a 16th of the circle from a 16th, 1 over 16, because 1 over 16 is 22.5 degrees. And so it's a 16th of the circle from the Aries point. And so that gives Zeus an extra poignancy. So what does it mean to have Zeus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint? Well, at worst, Zeus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint can be about assassinations. People getting killed with gunshots, fire. Vito talks about fire, explosions. And yes, he does talk about, I think, assassinations. So if you're a head of state today, tomorrow, you have to be extra careful. Your security has to be on alert. You've obviously got to look at places which are particularly unstable. Assassinations, I'm sure there are lots of people in Ukraine who have to worry about being assassinated, so they have to be on their guard. Getting hit by an artillery strike, that would be perfect symbolism for Zeus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. As far as we're concerned, probably it should be fine. But unless we do something stupid. If we're if we're really into guns, or we're into climbing trees, or I don't know. I suppose, if you're doing something dangerous, then I was actually cutting Scotch broom today with a brush cutter. You can apparently die from cutting Scotch broom with a brush cutter. Apparently most injuries when you're cutting, not surprisingly, with a brush cutter, come from on your left foot. I looked it up. There's a journal article saying left foot is particularly vulnerable, and very often you can get amputations and that kind of thing. So that would have, cutting my foot off with Zeus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint would have sort of fitted. But Zeus on the Mars-Saturn is more sort of explosive from that, and hence sort of perhaps a link with assassination. Now, as far as the 12 signs are concerned, as always, I've done the astrology for each of the signs for today. And remember, it's Monday, July the 24th, 2023. So, Aries, you don't know the future, and your understanding of psychology is not perfect. So, bear this in mind when considering other people's behavior. They're not robots, and they could do the last thing you expect. Rather than get upset by a sudden change of plans, see the whole thing as an opportunity. Taurus, Trying to adjust to changing circumstances can be exhausting. And if you make too many adjustments, you could grind to a standstill. So maybe you should have a zone of flexibility where you are ready to compromise. But you also need to have some red lines, remembering that Taurus is a fixed sign and Taurians were not put on the earth to mindlessly accommodate other people's needs. Gemini, it's okay to enjoy yourself, provided you're not sloppy or chaotic. Things can go wrong, and your idea of fun might not be to everyone's taste. Yet there comes a point where Geminis can be genuinely creative. The immediate results might not be obvious, but soon enough you'll make a big impression. Cancer, are you going anywhere? Right now, there doesn't seem to be much of a route, and maybe that's fine. For example, you could just stay at home watching the clouds gently pass by. But if you do have a set of goals, you need to think again about how you're going to achieve them, because right now, something seems to be missing. Leo, you continue to explore your environment. Things are new and they're also interesting, but you have a lingering doubt. You feel that if you move too far beyond your comfort zone, you'll be attracting danger. But really, things that are new often feel unsafe, and it may be a case of acclimatizing to a fresh set of circumstances. Virgo, you're a serious, grounded person, and you expect your needs to be respected and appreciated. So when you see irresponsible behavior, especially in terms of money, you may feel a need to intervene and criticize. But perhaps you should wait. The overall picture isn't sufficiently clear. Libra, the moon continues moving through your star sign. In general, you feel comfortable with what you're doing, and you're able to respond to the outside world in a competent but probably unspectacular way. But if you see something that doesn't make sense, consider the possibility that the root cause of the situation is you yourself. Scorpio, there's a lot to do, but you probably don't need outside help. Indeed, outside help might actually be more trouble than it's worth, especially in a career setting. Anyway, once you've done what you have to do, you can be more sociable and you can start involving other people in your plans for the future. Sagittarius, in terms of friendship, it's a question of quantity rather than quality. Meeting lots of people, having quick-fire conversations and moving on. It's probably not the time for more intimate contacts. And it is probably not a good idea to think too far ahead. The sun might now be in Leo, a fire sign like Sagittarius, but things are still unsettled. Capricorn, it's the beginning of a week and you need to hit the ground running. There are career opportunities and now is a good time to expand your profile. And if you're looking for a new job, you may find the right leads. You also have a chance to form a powerful rapport with people in authority. Aquarius, you feel a certain sense of flatness. It's more of the same, and it might feel that the promise of the times is not being met. But you can't expect excitement to appear from nowhere. You have to make it happen. And by exploring new subjects and new experiences, the gateway to a new universe will slowly start to open. Pisces, in terms of money, you can't assume that everything is sorted out. Even if there have been solemn promises, you need to interact with the world in a dynamic way and make sure that everything is in order. You'll find that some things have been forgotten, but don't worry, the omissions will soon be fixed. So let's move on to the I Ching. So as always, I threw 3 coins in the air and I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? So the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 46, pushing upwards. And in general, this is quite a good hexagram. It suggests that we can move forward, we can slowly make advances, we can gather up benefits and credits as we go along, and it's kind of looking good. But I don't know, there comes a point where, and I think we're going to hit this point quite quickly, we think we're going in the right direction, and just suddenly it's just not going to work. We're just going to feel like just exhausted. We're supposed to be focusing on a particular task. We're supposed to be moving towards our goals slowly but surely. But yeah, we have to really focus on that goal because there are going to be so many distractions. And yeah, we're going to feel really exhausted. We're going to feel at a certain stage that there's nothing more we can do to push upwards. So we might find that we're actually failing in our aim to push upwards. And there is a moving line. This line moves. So we move to a second hexagram, which is hexagram 18, which is decay, or work on what has been spoilt. So I think we're going to start to realize why we're not making progress. We're going to see that we've done something wrong, other people have done something wrong, that the preparations just simply haven't been good enough. And so we're going to have to take action to sort the problem out. So that means the rot has to be removed. I think the I Ching talks about like a can of worms. The worms are getting in the food. So we got to sort all this out. So if you want to make progress, you've got to stop thinking about pushing upwards and actually start thinking about looking at what you've got, looking at what the problem is, and sorting it out, because it's not in working. If it's not in working order, if it's decayed through negligence, it's got to be sorted out. So think about the area of life that you're trying to work on but you're not being successful on. Think about that decay and sort it out. But you can sort it out. It's not like it's impossible to sort out. The I Ching clearly says work on what has been spoilt. It's giving you a directive. Something's being spoilt, sort it out. So that's the I Ching, and I am now going to look at Uranus in the 7th house. Yes, I will be repeating some of the things I talked about a couple of days ago, but I'm mindful of the fact that someone has made a criticism, and I want to answer that criticism. So if you write a comment on my video and it's a constructive criticism, I'm not just going to say lol or something like that necessarily. I might reply with a whole video, which is kind of what I'm doing now. Let's go back to the astrology, and we will go back to that chart I was talking about, Joe Biden's chart. So it all started with me taking Joe Biden's chart, saying, hey, Joe Biden has got Uranus on the 7th house cusp. Therefore, he's potentially attracting a spouse who has an accident. Now, lots and lots and lots of people have Uranus in the 7th house, and they have happy marriages, and nothing bad happens to their spouse. Indeed, Joe Biden's second wife, Jill Biden. Nothing bad has happened to her. She hasn't had any accidents. It's just his first wife that had the accident. Maybe that's just chance. But as astrologers, we do try to we try to see things that fit. Sometimes we try too hard, but Uranus on the seventh house cusp is quite a powerful indicator of an accident. So what does that mean? Does that mean that his first wife, Neilea, was doomed the moment she married him, as I suggested? I mean, I'm probably overstated this point. I was perhaps being a bit flippant. But maybe there are other alternatives. We could consider the possibility that she was in danger of having a fatal accident anyway. And I think that's something that I would say was probably the case. Now, let me just go back to her chart. So here's her chart. Now, what I'm looking at in this chart is I'm looking at her Uranus. Now, this is, there's a lot of Uranus here. I'm talking about Uranus, really. Uranus, she has Uranus at 3 Gemini. She has her south node at 4 Pisces, north node at 4 Virgo. So that's what she's got in her natal chart. Now there's another thing she's got, which I'm afraid most astrologers are not going to pick up on, simply because it's a technique that has somewhat fallen out of favour. I don't know if it was ever in favour outside Germany. But if you look at, there's her Saturn, there's her Mars, and you can see that her Mars-Saturn midpoint is approximately 18, somewhere like 18 Cancer, somewhere like that. And so 18 Cancer. So Uranus is 45 degrees from her Mars-Saturn midpoint. In other words, she's got Uranus on her Mars-Saturn midpoint. Let me just show you her midpoint trees, just to show you what I mean. Maybe it's as big as possible. So here is her Uranus midpoint tree. And there you can see she's got Uranus semi-square the Mars-Saturn midpoint with a very tight orb, a 9-minute orb. Now, we don't have her time of birth, so we can't say for sure it's a 9-minute orb. But having Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, again, it has many connotations, but one connotation would be death through accident, because Mars-Saturn is about death. Uranus is about the type of death. I mean, I'll just tell you what Vitta says about Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint to give you some sort of objective view. Mars-Saturn, he says, Uranus says, sudden actions which separate, violent separation and death, sudden death. So that's how he would see it. Death that happens quickly, suddenly, through some kind of accident. So she has always got that potential for having a violent and sudden death. It was always there. So going back to her natal chart. So that means if anything triggers that Uranus, there's a danger. So last time, a couple of days ago, I looked at her solar arc directions. So her solar arc directions, I did her solar arc directions. These are her solar arc directions for December the 18th, 1972. And you can see that her sun has directed to about 4 degrees 7 Virgo, and Pluto is around 4. So remember, solar arc directions, you're moving everything in the horoscope 1 degree. So first year of life, you move everything in the horoscope 1 degree. 10th year of life, you move everything 10 degrees. This chart is when you've moved everything about 30 degrees, because she had the accident just after her 30th birthday. So if we put this in 2 wheels, you can see that sun Pluto is hitting her Uranus. Now you could say, well, it's kind of past her Uranus, so but it's pretty close, and in fact her Mars Saturn midpoint is at 1956 cardinal. So with the Sun at 4 degrees 7 Virgo, which is the same as kind of 19.7 Virgo, it's really starting to hit. It's really starting to hit. Sorry, I got it the other way around. Sorry, her Mars Saturn midpoint is at 1839 cardinal, and so her Uranus is right on it, and so it's exactly on the 45-degree angle. So yes, so she had Sun hitting her Uranus. Uranus was on the Mars Saturn midpoint, and this is the direction that I think led to her death. So, given the fact that we have found a clear indication in her chart that she was going to, but she was in real danger in around December 1972, and given her husband's Uranus on the 7th house cusp, it was like, I think he was just attracting someone who was going to live out that Uranus in the 7th for him. So I suspect that she did not sign her own death warrant by marrying Joe Biden, because probably she was vulnerable anyway. Maybe that was when she was going to, she was going to probably die anyway, whether or not she was married to Joe Biden. I mean, at least that's one view. Or maybe she was really in danger then, and by marrying Joe Biden with Uranus on the 7th, that was the final straw. That made it inevitable. Now, I think a lot of you listening to this are probably going to unsubscribe, because you may feel that I put a heavy emphasis on fate. Yes, I do. I think there's very little free will in life. And, when you're Joe Biden, the higher you go, if you become a senator, head of state, you have less and less free will. So if you want maximum free will, stay out of politics. And that's a good reason also to stay away from people who are in politics, because they may be detracting from your own free will. So maybe in that sense, maybe she shouldn't have married Joe Biden. It was a danger. If she'd known about her own chart, if she'd known about that direction, and if she'd known about Uranus in the 7th, then yeah, I would have said probably a bad idea. I would have said. So let's look at some other charts which have Uranus in the 7th. So let's look at Louis XVI. Now, Louis XVI of France, he was born 1754, and you can see he had Uranus in the 7th. Technically, you might say, well, it's in the 6th, but it's only 4 degrees off the cusp, and I would have argued that that is certainly a 7th house Uranus. If you were using whole signs, certainly a 7th house Uranus. And so here is someone who is, like Joe Biden. Maybe one needs to think carefully before marrying him. But But there was a 19th century astrology book which talked about Uranus in the seventh, which it suggested death by the mob, which is kind of appropriate for Louis XVI. I mean, I know the mob didn't literally drag him to the guillotine, but with Paris, you had the mob, and I suppose the mob was watching as his head was cut off. So that's his Uranus in the seventh, so yeah, his wife would have had to have been careful. But another thing is that he helped create a Uranus in the seventh, Uranus in the seventh organization, because he came to the throne, I believe, in 1774, which was 2 years before the American Revolution started. And as far as I know from the history books, I'm not a great expert, but I do believe that French intervention in the American Revolutionary War was crucial. If France had not have intervened, the British would almost certainly have won the Revolutionary War. Now, I'm sure America would have got its independence eventually, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, but it would not have got its independence when it did. And maybe that Uranus in the seventh, he was, as head of state of France in 1776 and throughout the Revolutionary Wars, he was, able to kind of facilitate this consciously and unconsciously. And clearly, as the head of state, he did what he could to help the US get its independence. And as you can see, just a reminder, that the USA's chart is, here's the USA's chart. There you go. Assuming the USA was born at 5:10 p.m. There you go. There is Uranus there's Uranus at 8 Gemini, and the ascendant at 12 Gemini. So that's what he created. That's what he helped create. And in helping to create the United States, he did himself in, because there is a view that France spent so much money on helping America get its independence. It wasn't cheap. It was one of the factors that led to the revolution, which led to his death. So the Americans need to realize that Louis XVI was kind of the midwife of their country, and he martyred himself for the country, because in the end he was guillotined as a result of a revolution, and the revolution had happened as a result of partly as a result of all that money spent on helping the Americans get their independence. And so that Uranus in the seventh is really, really poignant, I think, in Louis XVI's chart. Now, as far as his wife was concerned, like Neilea Biden, you had someone who married someone with Uranus in the seventh house. And here's Marie Antoinette. That's her chart. So Marie Antoinette... the only thing I really want to focus on with Marie Antoinette is her Mars-Saturn midpoint. I want to look at her directions. So if you look at Marie Antoinette's chart, there's her Mars at 16 Cancer. There's her Saturn at 23 Capricorn. Notice she's got Saturn on the 8th house cusp. So she's got a wide Mars-Saturn opposition. But then you can see that the moon at 20 Libra is making a T-square. And it's also moon. She's got moon on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So moon on a Mars Saturn is death of a woman. That's one way of seeing it. So if we then look at her solar arc directions, these are her solar arc directions set for October the 16th, 1793. And that was the date that Marie Antoinette was guillotined. Now, as this is a video which has Uranus as its main focus, that's what I want to look at in this chart, her solar arc directed Uranus. So with solar arc directions, remember, 1 degree equals 1 year. She was executed when she was about 37. And so if we want to know what was happening then, we would move her natal horoscope, every planet, every point, 1 degree for every year. So we'd move everything 37 degrees. So there's her Uranus directed to 1954 Aries. So if we put this side by side with the natal chart, we get this. So you can see Marie Antoinette's natal Uranus is at quite close to her midheaven. So that says, where she's going to. She's going to a revolutionary situation. She's in the thick of a revolution. Certainly, in the popular imagination, she was like part of it all. Let them eat cake and all of that kind of thing. I think she didn't actually say that, but was it let them eat brioche or something? I don't know. But she was seen in popular imagination as being part of the revolution, as a central figure. And there's her Uranus in the 10th house, natal Uranus in the 10th house. And then we click this Uranus on 37 degrees and it takes us to 1954 Aries. And then we see that this Uranus at 1954 Aries is opposition her natal moon at 2040 Libra. Remember, her moon is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, you might then say, well, hold on, her moon is at 2040 Libra, but Uranus is only at 1954 Aries. It's not exact. That's true. And certainly when we're doing solar arc directions, we do allow some leeway. But the exact position of her Saturn-Mars midpoint was 1956 Libra. So in fact, her solar arc directed Uranus was exactly on her Mars-Saturn. It was exactly on her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So she had Uranus hitting this T-square, hitting the Mars-Saturn, and that's really what killed her. So in this case, I think she might have died anyway then. It's a bit grisly, that direction. But to have that kind of death, that's not exactly the kind of symbolism for dying in your bed. I think that when she was born, she was kind of fated to marry Louis XVI, and therefore she was kind of fated to die as she did, and when she did during the French Revolution. I know I'm being a bit controversial here. A lot of people are, like to have a bit of free will, but if you're into astrology, you can't believe 100% in free will. If you believe in 100% in free will, then really astrology is not a viable philosophy. And to me, there is a lot of fate, and the higher we go up the social strata, the less free will we have. Kings, presidents, they don't have any free will at all, in my opinion. If you're insignificant and everyone ignores you, like me, then you've got loads of free will. But if you're a head of state or someone like Marie Antoinette, you don't really have much free will, in my opinion. So I wanted to look at a couple of other charts very quickly that have Uranus in the 7th. One chart is that of Roman Polanski, the director Roman Polanski. Now Next month, August the 9th, is the anniversary of the murder of his wife by the Manson gang, Sharon Tate. She was murdered on August the 9th, 1969. So you might argue that that kind of fits. He's got Uranus in the 7th, opposition. Sorry, that's a solar arc direction for him. There we go. That's better. He's got Uranus in the 7th, opposition Mars, aggressive, angry Mars. That certainly symbolizes death of a spouse, the spouse dying in not just an accident but being murdered. That kind of fits. I'll be looking at his chart and Sharon Tate's chart and what was going on August the 9th in more detail in a couple of weeks' time. And, the 7th house cusp is not just about the spouse. It's also about enemies and rivals. So if we look at the chart of Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was assassinated in 1984, in autumn 1984, she has Uranus on the 7th house cusp, in very closely on the 7th house cusp, and she was assassinated by her bodyguard. So, that kind of indicates if it is your destiny to be killed by your rivals, having extra bodyguards isn't going to help. They're going to get through anyway. Indeed, your bodyguards might be the ones that kill you. As a side note, I don't think it really relates to her Uranus in the 7th, but her two of her sons, I don't know how many other, I don't know what other children she had, but Sanjay Gandhi, who I think was her heir apparent, he died had an untimely death in, I think he died in a glider accident or a plane crash, something like that. And then another son, Rajiv Gandhi, died after her death in early 90s, I think. He was blown up by terrorists in southern India. I think they were Tamil Tigers or something like that, or some Tamil group blew him up. So I don't know whether that fits, but anyway, just a reminder that the 7th house is not just about the spouse, it's also about one's enemies. So that's all I'm going to say for today. I would like to thank 7117725 for the constructive criticism, and I hope this video has gone some way towards answering it. So I will talk to you tomorrow.